Live. So, hello, good afternoon, maybe good evening to some of our participants and viewers. My name is Monica Muller, and I have the great privilege of being a teacher for the Insight Alliance. And so this panel, we have decided to invite some friends of the Insight Alliance to come and have a lunchtime conversation. It's lunchtime on the West Coast in Portland, where I am. You know, the general theme of this conversation is kind of inquiring into where inspired action comes from and how that can be a catalyst for cultivating and creating change. And so we've got some lovely guests that have a really beautiful way of sharing about how transformative insight can be. And so I'd like to invite panelists to take a minute to introduce yourselves. Can we start perhaps with you, Mavis?
Hello, everybody. My name is Mavis Karn. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I have been teaching the principles that are the foundation for Insight Alliance for about 45 years. I've spent my time with kids and adults and businesses and agencies and prisons and athletes and so on and so forth. I have spent most of my time making sure that I am in the state of mind that is what we call our healthy, innate health. And my job, as I see it, is to teach other people, if they're interested, that they are way better made than they've ever imagined, that there are possibilities for their life that are beyond anything they could think of. And number one is there's nothing wrong with them. Not a thing. So that's what I do.
Thank you so much for introducing yourself, Mavis, and I'm so grateful that you're here.
Thank you.
Would you mind muting so that I can invite Miss Crystal next to please tell us how we have the great privilege of knowing you.
Hello, my name is Crystal Burns. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I work with One Solution, and I also have a long history of working with the mind, thought, and feelings. And I'm excited to be here. I look forward to speaking more about that shortly, and thank you.
Yay, thank you, Crystal. Derek, would you mind telling us about yourself a little bit?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Yeah, no problem, Monica. Yeah, I'm Derek. I'm from the UK. I'm in the UK. I'm from the UK. I'm here, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I come into contact with this understanding, what Mavis was talking about, because everything basically Mavis said, I'm still on that journey of discovering my potential and where it can lead me to. And so far it's led me to a lot of other amazing places, speaking to amazing people like yourself, and all just doing the reverse of what I used to do and just following myself and being myself and finding out that I'm good enough. So yeah, I just can't wait to start and tell you a little bit about myself and how that has changed my life. So yeah, glad to be here and thank you.
We can't wait to hear. And then Anna, please, since you are the reason we're all here, or you are the one that brought us together.
Right. Just for today. Well, my name's Anna, and I'm the founder and program director of the Insight Alliance. We're, the Insight Alliance is having a 30 days of giving fundraising thing at the moment, and we thought that having a panel we had one last week and there'll be one next week too, but having a panel of really sort of giving people an opportunity to sort of understand on maybe a deeper level what it is that we do and why the work that we're doing in England, in Minneapolis and Chicago, in Portland is transformative, and it helps people live in ways, and myself included, that I never thought was possible. And that really comes from understanding my own mind, and kind of who I am behind that. And so we're going to be talking some about that. And I'm just really excited because I didn't actually know that Crystal, Derek and Mavis didn't know each other, because I just assumed, but it's actually kind of fun because now we're going to be here, and I work with each of them in different ways. And I have the privilege of, not enough time, but spending little bits of time here and there, kind of hanging out. So, and obviously with you, Monica, is always a pleasure. So it's just nice to be here. It's nice to kind of just have this conversation and be able to kind of share a little bit about what we're doing and why this is so important to creating kind of, like transformation in a world that sometimes just looks so crazy and so difficult, difficult place to live. And it's just nice to be here and having this conversation. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Anna. So I feel a little bit uncomfortable orchestrating who goes when and how. And so my invitation is going to be that I'll ask a question, just kind of generally. And if you feel inspired to talk, maybe just give me an indication, and then I can ask you to share. Does that sound fair enough? Okay, so I guess a place that I think would be maybe helpful to begin is, can you tell us perhaps a story or about an experience where you have come to see things differently than before? What looks differently for you now than maybe before you started looking in this direction? Yes, Miss Mavis.
Mavis. Well, up until about 45 years ago, I was still working in the field of psychology, but I was working in the traditional way of finding out what's wrong with people and going back into the past and diagnosing them and analyzing them and so on and so forth. And I was pretty good at helping people find out what was wrong with them and giving a name to that, a diagnosis. But I was getting a little tired of it. It's exhausting to kind of be working with sadness and depression and fear and abuse and not really knowing what to do about it much other than explain it or comfort people or whatever, because nobody in any of my undergraduate or graduate classes ever taught me how to help people be happy. That never even came up. And so in my own life, I didn't know about that either. It wasn't that I was miserable, but I was certainly stressed a lot. I was a young mom with 3 kids, and life was a lot of hard work. I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed myself. I liked being a mom. I liked my work, but I worried a lot about what might happen. I worried about not being good enough. I worried about pretty much any subject you can name. So one day in the middle of this life, I was offered a chance to go out to the University of Minnesota graduate school for a workshop. And I didn't even care what the workshop was. I got 2 days off work, and that's all I cared about. So I went and I heard 3 PhD psychologists from Florida who had spent some time with a man named Sid Banks, who had had some insights about how human beings experience their lives. And it turns out that all human experience originates with thought, that we are experiencing our lives from the inside out. Now, I had been living in a world where I thought the outside had everything to do with what was going on inside me. And I spent a lot of my time then trying to get the outside fixed so that I could feel better. And in the history of human beings, that has never worked, but I didn't know that. But what I did find out did work, that the outside is the outside. It's stuff's going on, there's situations, circumstances, but our experience is coming from the meaning we're making of it. And that can change like that. Our thinking about it, how we think about it, is creating our experience. Our emotions are our thoughts, and our emotions are letting us know the quality of the experience we're creating all the time, 24/7. I thought the top of my head was going to come off because I knew that was the truth. That was the truth. There isn't anything wrong with people. They just think there is, and they can prove it, but it isn't true. The troubles that we have, the suffering that we have, the pain in life that we have is directly attributable to the fact that we do not know how perfectly we're made. We did not know that. It's not our fault we didn't know it, but we can know it now. And when we know it now, we see that we aren't our thinking. We aren't what we've done. We aren't what's happened to us. We are the creators of our experience. And in that, when we understand that, we see how much suffering and misery is optional. And that changed my whole life. It was clumsy. It was awkward. Because I kept having thoughts about the outside was the problem. But I kept catching myself at that and seeing, it's my thinking. It's my thinking. I kept wanting to throw exceptions at it. Well, what about if I don't have enough money? That's not my thinking. But then I would say, well, does every young mom with 3 kids that doesn't have any money feel exactly the same way all the time? And I couldn't say yes to that. It must have something to do with our attitudes, how we're thinking about it. Well, how about when somebody dies? That's not just my thinking. Well, does everybody feel exactly the same way about when somebody dies for exactly the same length of time, for exactly the same intensity? Nope. Must be something then about each individual. Maybe it's their thinking. So the more I threw at it, the more I couldn't find any holes at it. And I am 82 years old, and I am spending most of my time passing this information on to anybody that's interested, because it's the most fun I have ever had in my life. And I mean fun in the deepest sense of the word. Makes you glad to be alive.
You know, that was beautiful, you know, Mavis. So much what you said resonated with me, and I know we don't come from the same sort of lifestyle. We don't come from the same sort of, but the same thing was going on in the background just looks exactly the same to me. And when you use the word clumsy, for me, it was like, to get this understanding, I had to get arrested and get put in a place that I never ever wanted to be, because I've been there before, and that's the last place I would request to go and find the real me. That's the last place I'd expect it. But it seems like that act there, and me getting arrested, and a lady who decided to bring this understanding into her prisons, and for me to then get it, and it totally changed my life and changed my thinking, because my reality of what my world was told me what I had to do, told me who I had to be, and told me where I had to aspire to get to. And I never really noticed that in all that time, there was no room for what I really wanted. It had flashed up as, oh, I like that, or I might like that, but the circles I was in, or it wasn't to be doing those things. I had to, or I told myself I had to be doing this, or I had to be doing that. And for me to be, I got this understanding to when I was in prison, and that's how I'd always lived my life, just on the other side of the law, and that is the way it had to be. But then when I discovered through going on a course that I only went on because I wanted to try to get to a nicer prison, basically, and get better conditions. So I went on this course. Any course will do, yeah, just to get out my cell and to try and get a better place. And I find the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in the world, and it's me. And I was never good enough before. I was always my biggest critic, my biggest person to judge myself, the first person to limit myself onto what I could actually do. And to notice that that was all fault, and I could hold on to it if I wanted to, or I could let it go. And then the realization that I wasn't my thinking was like I was walking around with these 2 heavy sacks of lead. And when I realized I wasn't my thinking, it's like they just dropped instantaneously. And I happened to be in a 6x4 cell with no access to nothing other than a TV with 4 TV channels on it. And I felt the best I've ever felt in my life, just because I dropped these 2 bags of lead that I thought were real. And that was just scratching the surface, because up to today, I'm still discovering and still realizing things. I realized I was selling drugs for the best part of 30 years. And I thought, yeah, that was my tackle, and why was I doing that? And society and the world I was brought up in. But to look into my childhood now, which I've started to do, and started to see what people call trauma informed, and to start to look at that, I would usually go to where I read outwardly and look outwardly and blaming and this and that. But I did go there when I first looked at it, because something happened what made me look in that area. And I did go there and outwardly and start to question who I really was. But when it all settled, I realized that was my usual go-to place, and there was nothing to find there. Nothing to find there except more pain. But when it settled, I realized that all the answers were in me. And it's the same message that I'd seen from the day I got this understanding. And it's the same message that's gonna see me through whatever I think is real, when I see them for what they really are. And for me, it's just a journey, it's just a gift. The man, Sydney Banks, Mavis, you've met him, he's just uncovered something and handed it down to people who've handed it down to people, and somehow by the grace of the universe, it's landed in my lap. And it's just totally changed my life in a way that I could never even imagine. And I've had to do nothing for it. If you could ever believe that, I've had to do nothing for it. All my life, I thought I had to do stuff, or I had to put a little lie here, or a little con there, or a little mask there just to get it. But I realized that I just had to show up as me. And I was always good enough. And it was only me ever standing in my way. But that's my little bit of how it's changed my life, from how I thought I was okay, I thought I didn't need changing, to realizing that the real me was still a baby waiting to grow and discover himself and discover his potential. And I'm just glad and grateful that I'm walking that journey now. And yeah, it's just a beautiful thing. Every time I share, I just feel just grateful for being, for the people like Anna, who came into prisons and spoke to people like me and didn't see what everyone else was usually seeing, the rap sheet, or what they looked like they was in for, or the mask that they was putting up. they saw the real me. And from someone else to see the real me, that made me adventure enough to look in and find the real me as well. So yeah, I was grateful for everybody. And yeah, I think that's me. I'll stop talking now, but yeah, yeah.
Just as a side comment, it's working. I'm like, I have chills, and so I just want to say that this is already a success, and I can't wait to hear what comes next.
I find myself waiting for Crystal, and then so I'm gonna you go, and then you carry on.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. My name is Crystal. It's such a pleasure to be here in the moment with you all. Oh my goodness. I just love this space. I'm gonna go ahead and share bits and pieces because I could go 40 years with you guys, but I want to start off with how I ended up in that kind of space of wanting to hold on to my sanity. I experienced some trauma at a young age, and it became like a monster that would just show up. And I'd be like, I just want to control these thoughts. I don't feel like dealing with this trauma right now. So even as a young age, I always knew that it had something to do with the mind. But at the same time, I wasn't even accepting myself to try to understand myself, because now I'm putting all of these labels on myself. I'm not good enough. People are going to know. I'm ashamed. I'm this, I'm that. So I was beating myself up before I even gave myself a chance, not because of what I truly believed about myself, but what society was saying that I was supposed to look like, who I was supposed to be because of what I had experienced. So I was living the narrative of something that wasn't even of myself. So I journeyed and journeyed and journeyed in time. And I'm always looking out. I'm like on this journey, and I'm searching and I'm searching and I'm searching. And I'm coming up with the same thing, just that empty like feeling. And it's like, okay. Until I have 3 children. So now I'm going to skip, sorry, but that's just a portion. So I took that mindset into parenting it, if just follow me. I took that mindset into parenting. Now I have to be this mother that has to just protect her children, and I want to be great, and I don't want them to experience any harm in the world. I'm going to just embed myself in making sure that my children are okay. And in that time, again, I'm still repairing, I'm still healing, and I'm still trying to understand. Now we're moving on to the third stage. So my son came to me and he was telling me some things that he was going through. And I'm like, well, you could never live up to what I've been through. No way. I've done this, I've done that, I've done this, I've done that. And I'm like paraded myself on being like this great, great mother. And then the understanding came that you're not listening. I wasn't transparent. I was so stuck in my head. I'm not listening to anyone. And I created this false reality through something that happened 30 years ago that still was showing up in every space, every space. And when I realized that I had control over that, I started listening. I started being intentionally present in the moment. I mean, I have helped so many people on so many levels, but I was never really present. I was never really dealing directly with Crystal's issues. I was always trying to clean up somebody else's space, trying to help guide somebody else to something or to someone, and never really took that time through it all to do it for myself. So when I came to this understanding, it was like, we've been together a long time. I just didn't even understand that I had the understanding. And it was so surreal, and it was so true. And you can apply it in any space and it will show itself to be true. Any space, every time, every time. And that's that well of just I wish I would have had this when I was younger in juvenile, which I'm so happy for the work that Anna does, because most of my juvenile life, I was in group homes and I was incarcerated. But that's another story. Not all people in jail. Unfortunately, that's the place where they put, like myself, I had mental health issues. I was traumatized. I didn't have anyone to listen or to understand. And I had behavioral issues and no one was listening. No one was asking the right questions. I didn't know how to tell the story. So it created me being institutionalized, me being labeled, and me being kind of what they felt needed to be rehabilitated. I just needed to be heard. I just wanted some understanding. You know, we always look for understanding in situations that we don't understand, but that's another story. So thank you so much, Anna, for the services that you provide to the juveniles, because if I would have had that when I was coming up in that space, God knows, I still landed here, but I probably could have got there a little bit earlier. But I'm still happy that I was able to get this understanding and apply it. But I'm saying this, I know I'm everywhere. This understanding can be the foundation to anything. And it can happen just like that. It's just like that. When you allow your inner self to lead, we will never fail ourselves. Even when it looks bad in the beginning, it will end up landing where it's actually supposed to be. And we may not always have the answers, but we just have to trust ourselves, and trust our understanding and trust our ability to know that we are kind of perfectly made in an extent. And yeah, I'm just so happy to be here. I could go on and on. I love you guys. And Anna, again, I thank you so much for the work that you do. And life full circly turns itself around. My son works with Anna in the prisons with the youth. So it's like, wow, I birthed someone that is now providing a service that I once needed. But now he's offering that. He's a gift to that. And little does he know, I was going to court as a juvenile with him, holding the judge would lock me up for the weekend. I used to have to give a long story. Just have to give my baby up to go and freaking do weekends in jail. And now he's speaking to youth in jail. So I just say that to say, live in the moment. Feelings do change and we will experience them. But the greatest thing about it is they don't last. I can be sad one second and happy the next. It's all about the choice that I choose for it to be within that moment and how I view whatever is being presented or whatever I'm presenting to the world. So that's my 2 cents. I can go on and on, you guys, but I'm not. And thank you so much, Anna.
No, Crystal. We could be here. I know. I was just thinking, it's like we could just like hang out all afternoon. It's so fun. I know. Well, just on that, like we could actually have a youth group, which I totally got the times wrong. And so Prince, Crystal's son, is actually with 5 minutes notice. I'm like, can you do this group for us in prison? So he's on the other Zoom right now doing that. So I love him to death, and I'm so glad that he's part of our team. It's so fun listening to everybody, because it's like, and it's like I'm present, and then I pop into where am I going to go, and then I come back, and then I just like right in the moment, and then I pop out again. I'm like, oh, where am I going to go, you know? And it's so fascinating, because I can listen to everybody and see myself in everybody, because even though we've had very different lives, that feeling of searching, or that feeling of looking outside myself to find an answer that I was convinced was going to come from somewhere else other than me, because it couldn't possibly come from me, because I would sabotage myself. I'd get caught up in so much thinking and prison in my own mind that it was impossible to think that any answer that I could have that was useful was going to come from inside of me. And so I grew up and I lived in a world where I was constantly looking to others. I was constantly looking outside of myself, and I was constantly, you know, like feeling inadequate or feeling worthless or judging myself against other people, and having therefore a lot of insecure feelings that I didn't realize at the time was just information, because my mind kept spinning on how shit I was at this, and how I wasn't good enough at this, and how I should be better at that, and how this wasn't working, and all the rest of it. So of course, my body is going to give me a feeling of my mind. But at the time, it was like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. This insecure feeling means I'm just an insecure person. And it was a label I gave myself from a really young age. And the way that I would, find relief from that feeling was through an eating disorder. It was through drinking. It was through taking drugs. It was through any way that I could find that would give me a different sensation than the one that I was feeling, because I used to really believe that the feelings that I was feeling was who I am. And there was something that in our cohort, when I was learning about the mind at One Thought in London, that we've come kind of affectionately to call the kind of drop the shopping moment. We all have our drop the shopping moment where we have an insight about something, where, like Derek, you were saying, these like bags of rocks just fall away, or you're seeing something that looks fresh with new eyes, that's something that looks true, on a level that you didn't even know existed is not true. Or when Mavis was saying that she heard something in this that she just knew that was true, because it just, you feel it on a level, on a deeper level. And so just one insight that I'll just share, like a story that was actually, I was thinking, okay, what's my sort of first real like drop the shopping moment where I saw that I had health and I wasn't just a crazy person, was actually in Sainsbury's in Kilburn High Road, when I was living in London. And we'd actually just had a conference, about this this work, and I was just so chill. Like, I just had 3 days of just being present in the moment and just being around warm, beautiful people, and I was just in such a good feeling, and I was just in love with everything, and wasn't thinking about myself, because as we know, when we're in a quieter mind, not so much is personal. We just feel love for the world in a different kind of way, where it's not about you or me or anyone else. And I was just in a really lovely feeling, and I was in Sainsbury's, and it was on a Sunday night, and I was hungry, and which is the worst time for me to be in a supermarket, because I thought back then that I was just like the most impatient person in the world. And it was just who I am. It was just part of my my makeup. It was nothing. It's like, I'm an insecure person, I'm an impatient person, and that's all there is to it. And I could make up all sorts of reasons why that's true. It was my star sign, it was my mother, it was this and that and the other. But like usual, I'd stand in a queue or stand in a line in the supermarket, and I would assume a role. I'd assume a role as an impatient person, because there was no other way to be, because my impatience looked like it had 4 walls with no door. And even before I got in a line, like the water level of my thinking would go up. I would have scanned the shop to see how many people are in the shop and who's going to possibly be in front of me. And then, am I going to get into this line, or am I going to get into that line? And I've got to get into the shortest line, because then I've got to get out of here as quickly as possible, because otherwise I'm going to lose my shit, and start having some sort of panic attack in the shop, and that would never look good. So then I was in this line. There was like the short line with the three if you've got less than 15 items kind of line. And there was one woman who was this older lady who was just struggling to find her purse, and she was just taking forever. And someone else was definitely had more than 15 items. And then there was someone else who was chatting with the checkout woman like she was her friend. Now, normally that would make me crazy, because I'd be like, what the hell is everyone doing? Like, why can't they just hurry up? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. Which is just me kind of getting caught up in my mind. And this is such a basic example, by the way, but I just thought sometimes, the simple ones that can be helpful. And I was just unbelievably relaxed, and I was with my husband, and I was like, oh, that woman can't find her purse. Do you think we should go help her? And Charles looked at me like I was like mad, because he was expecting me to be anxious and really, really nervous. And I had an insight in that moment. I didn't feel impatient. Like, I was so relaxed. And there was something that I saw, that if I could have a different experience about the same thing that I'd been having this whole time. It could not be the line. The line could not be giving me my experience. And all that narrative I had around me just being an insecure person, or sorry, me being an impatient person, and where I'd come into a line and assume a role, I was doing that to myself. I realized that I was doing that. I was setting myself up every time I'd assume this character, because I'm just an impatient person. And when I'm in a supermarket, I can't help but do that. You know, and so what was so it was such a simple insight, but it changed everything. It changed my experience of traffic. It changed my experience of my husband moving slowly in the house to get out, you know, in the morning, or it changed my experience of, because I'd let go of something that it looked like this was me. It looked like I was this person and therefore there's no way out of it. But in having that insight and seeing that that's not who I am, it's just where my mind is in the moment, and my body's going to give me an experience of my mind because that's how it works. It's like, of course it is. Like, that's just, I can then be in any kind of situation now and not assume any sort of role. And I can show up and be totally chilled in a situation where I would have been absolutely mad, batshit crazy. Well, I just thought I just had to deal with that and suck it up because it was who I am. And so I think that was my first real insight into the kind of the experience that I was having in the moment around the way my mind worked. And it was never going to be the line, the shop, the people, even how hungry I was, that was going to give me an experience of impatience. And it actually changed my life, because how I moved through the world, I didn't actually realize I carried that much anxiety until it wasn't there anymore, until that bag of rocks like fell away. So that was one of my like deep insights that helped really maybe a little bit less crazy than I am now.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone. So I'm kind of noticing, even right now as we're talking, I'm kind of reflecting on how much being present and being in a peaceful state of mind really does shift not only our experience, but how we relate to one another. And one of the things that I noticed rather early when I was going into offer these classes with Anna at CRCI, which is a correctional institute in Portland, was that in the first week, it feels really kind of like gruff, and we'll have 20 inmates and we'll be introducing, and it feels kind of tense and of course that could be my own thinking. But one of the things that I noticed was that after several weeks of kind of having these conversations, and then it's a men's prison, so the men would go and we'd meet them the next week, usually somewhere around week 7. I noticed that I would go in and it would feel really almost playful, almost silly, really light, and where everyone's kind of like it feels like everyone's coming from a different state of mind than what I would experience in week 1. And so I'm kind of thinking and reflecting right now about how maybe do you have any stories or any reflections about how this way of understanding or this way of looking or can be transformative for yourself or for others that you work with, or that you, as Mavis said, teach if others are interested? Do you have any reflections or stories about how this can be transformative?
So here in Chicago, we started facilitating in schools with CPS parents. So we would do monthly retreats in the schools with the parents, creating the conversation and just facilitating the whole the whole notion of the understanding. And believe it or not, at the end of it all, our parent advisory council grew at the schools, parent leadership grew at the schools. Parents were able to now come together and communicate in a space to where it was just so much noise. They didn't even know that the noise existed. So once we were able to like kind of facilitate guiding them to see all of these things, a huge shift in the culture and climate just within the school itself changed, and also in the parenting dynamic. You know, parents were more now showing up more in that resilient space instead of in that space of hopelessness, is what I call it. So I know this to be true and know that it's to work. And I've used it in my home, and I've seen the shift in my home and within the space that I occupy. It shows up whenever you bring it. It's just going to show up because it's so natural. It's just the naturalist state, I think, that I've experienced, and I love to dwell in, and I love to secretly bring people there. Guide people to themselves, because we all are one. And I believe that we all feel, we all experience similar things. It just might show up differently. But because some of the learned behavior that has come along this journey, it creates that disconnect. But at the end of it all, we are all one. At the end of it all, you know. So I just wanted to put that in there. But yes, it's our parents have really grown, and we're actually going to be providing this service this year. And it's just exciting to see the shift and change within the community.
Yeah, Mavis, please.
I think one of the most maybe powerful experiences I've had with it was in a prison project that I did some years ago. I went to a kid prison, kids up to 17, about an hour south of my house. I went there every Sunday morning for 2 years and taught classes in teaching people how well they're made. So these kids were learning that they weren't in prison because there was something wrong with them. They weren't in prison because they were flawed or big mistakes or throwaway kids or something. They were there because they acted on some thoughts that were not high quality and made some decisions that got them put in prison because that was the best they knew to do given what they saw as possible. So it's not like when I first went there that they were just, oh yay, Mavis is here. They were not. They didn't like my age. They didn't like my profession. Some of them didn't like my skin color and whatever else that there was about me. But the only reason they signed up for the classes is they got out of chores for a couple hours. So the first day, we had spent a year planning this project, trying to get all the red tape done and the funding for it and all of that. And we, first day, we were pretty excited we were going to go down there. And I have never been called so many names in my life. Now, they weren't loud. They were kind of under their breath, but because there were guards around and so forth. But I was let known that I was a piece of garbage, and they were particularly interested in entertaining me. So no, it's not that I enjoyed that, but it wasn't surprising to me. I've been working with kids for a while. And so when we were leaving, one of the interns that was working with me, he used to be a pro football player, and he he said, well, that didn't go too well. Or actually, I said that. I said, that didn't go too well. And he said, didn't go too well? It was like he just, Mavis, what's the matter with you? That was just horrible. And I said, yeah, well, they're just not used to me yet. So I expected the next week the pretty much the same thing to happen. It did not happen. They wanted to give me the best chair, and they wanted to know if I wanted some water, and it was Ms. Mavis and all of this, and I was getting a little suspicious. So there was one kid there that was kind of leader of the pack, and I said, okay, Daryl, what's the deal here? Last week you're gonna string me up, and this week I'm Queen of the May. What's going on? And he said, you came back. I said, what? He said, we had bets you weren't going to come back. I said, really? He said, yeah, usually works. I said, oh man, I was going to come back and come back and come back until you just quit. You got tired of being a rat. And so he said, yeah, but you owe me $5. So for whatever reason, they couldn't sustain it. I don't know why. It doesn't matter. But fast forward a few months, we're sitting in the class. I was about to start class, but there was a new kid that came, and I wanted to introduce him. And he had come from Chicago. He had been living in Cabrini Green. It is no longer there, but it was not a good place to live. And when he was 10, he came home from wherever he'd been one day, and his mother and his siblings were gone. The apartment was empty. They left. Nobody knew where they went. And he wasn't saying this to shock us. He intimated that the reason that they left him behind is that he was a bad kid. And so he'd been on his own, and he went from place to place, and I don't know how he made it, but he lived a few places, or a few nights in one place and then another place, and he got into drug dealing and all kinds of stuff. But he was still alive. By this time he was, I can't remember, 16 or 17. And he was telling this story to the other kids in the class. And when he got done, I was about to say something about that, him being a bad kid thing. And the kid next to me said, can I talk? I said, oh, sure. He said, Robbie, your mama didn't leave you because you was no bad kid. She left because she didn't know how to be no good mama. And the other kids just went, yeah. And they went, agreed with that. And they said, she isn't bad. She just didn't know you shouldn't do that. And they kept saying these things, and Robbie was just dumbstruck. He didn't know what to make of that. But these kids did. I didn't have to say a thing. And can you imagine how much more powerful it was that they said it than I did? I expected a lot from the program. I just didn't even know I could expect that. And it taught me a lot, that as high a bar as I had set, there was a higher bar, way higher. And I've been learning that ever since. That my imagination can only take me to a certain place. But there is a place way higher and way better than that. And I assume that now. I'm not so surprised by it, but I assume it, that the best I can imagine isn't even close to what's possible. These people these fellow human beings that are in prison aren't there because of who they are. They're there because they didn't know who they are. And it's our job to show them who they are.
Just beautiful, Mavis. It's a beautiful story. And even on my journey, I've seen transformation, I've seen people change, I've seen people drop. But even to know where I've come from, to know that I went back into prison and started to facilitate a group that a prevention against knife crime. Because in England, in the UK, we've got a bit of a gang problem as well as in the US. But we was running this group, and it was for, I think it was 18 to 24-year-olds, people who had been involved in that gang culture sort of thing. And they were meant to be vetted to make sure two rival gang members weren't meant to be in the same room at the same time. But somehow, it had slipped under the radar and one guy got in that weren't meant to be in there with another guy. And I think the thing that saved us was that one of the guys had done one of our programs before. He'd done like a 4-week program, and then he just thought, oh, that was okay, and then went away. Then we came back in doing a knife crime program, and he signed up for it. And he was sitting there, and he saw the next guy come in who weren't meant to be in the same room as him because he had killed his cousin. And he went court for it, and he got off for it. So he had a thing in his head saying, anytime I see him, I have to exact revenge. But when he came in the room, because of what he knew about the 4-week course he was on, he just said, you know what, let me just sit here and see what he says and just play it by ear. And then the other guy sat down, he sort of recognized him, and he went to shake his hand, not knowing who he was. And the other guy just sat there like, no, I'm not shaking hands, but I'm just watching what's going on. So by the end of the course now, when the guy started talking about how he really felt, and he never called any names, but he said I was involved in a situation and it messed up my life, and I didn't know, I wasn't even me, I was involved, but it wasn't me. And he was so vulnerable. And the next guy's hearing him talking, he's obviously talking about the incident to do with his cousin. But at the end, he had to ask him, do you know who I am? And the guy said, no, I don't know who you are. You look familiar, but I don't know who you are. He goes, yeah, I'm that guy's cousin. You killed my cousin. And he's like, oh, and he goes, but you know what? Because I can hear where you're coming from and where I'm feeling right now. It's all just been a long process that we just need to end right now. And the two of them shook hands and said, you know what? The way I heard you break down to what, because I'd never looked at it, what effect it had on you. And he broke it down that he weren't sleeping, he weren't this, and they were, his younger sister went to the same school as the guy because they used to live in the same area, but because he moved 2 roads down, different postcode, he had to be seen to be in the other gang. But just to see all of that fall away, and they shook hands and they said, you know what, this is finished right here and now. And then when we done a little testimonial to see where their head was at, the guy said the most beautiful thing. He said, you know what, when I was sitting there and he was talking, at first I wanted to hurt him. But after he started to talk, I realized that hurting him, I would just be hurting myself because he is feeling the same way that I was feeling. So how can I try to hurt him? I'm just hurting myself. And that to me just blew me away. Just blew me away. They were both in there enough tears and saying, I'm finished with this life. I'm finished with all of it. And part 2, I don't know what they've done with themselves, but just to have that open realization in that moment and to see themselves being able to forgive in that situation, I know that's just opened them up a little bit more for seeing something more in any situation. Like Anna and Crystal alluded to, this thing covers everything. So you see something in that area, if you're prepared to shine a light in the next area, you will see something that looks similar as well. And it's just a beautiful thing. When you see someone else unwrap that gift, that's another beautiful thing. So beautiful. But yeah, this thing is the most beautiful thing that I've seen, and it spreads and brings just as much joy. But yeah, I love that.
I so love that story, because, you know, working in the population that we work with, or working with the humans that we work with, you see that. And I think something that Mavis said is that people aren't in prison because of who they are, it's because they don't see who they are. And that is something that I think gets so missed and so misunderstood. And I know we're nearly out of time, so I'm going to keep it really short. But something is misunderstood, that at the core of every human is love and understanding. And it makes me emotional even to say that, because it's just true. And so we have the privilege to work with people that have been discarded or been locked away and whatever. But when people feel better, they do better. And there's no exceptions to that, because when you start to feel at peace inside, it just doesn't occur to you to want to hurt yourself or other people. It occurs to you to be generous. It occurs to you to listen. It occurs to you to show up for somebody else. It occurs to you to give someone the benefit of the doubt. It occurs to you to, like Derek said, drop a whole bunch of narrative and listen and be present to someone else's truth, and then find forgiveness. Like, that is what's at the core of all humans. And so all we're doing is like, it's like uncovering what's already there. And that's been expressed so beautifully by everybody in this panel, because we've seen it, because it's like we have the best jobs in the world where you just get to see people wake up to who they really are. And no one is left out of that. And so I've just got like untold stories of where people, young men in the youth prison, or people who've been in prison their entire lives because they just are caught in this cycle of recidivism, until they see that they have health and they're not broken and they don't need fixing, and that they never knew there was nothing wrong with them because they've been told over and over again that there was something wrong. And when you point someone back towards their own health versus their diagnoses or their behaviors or their bad feelings, but you point someone in the direction of health, something starts to open. And then, like, what naturally comes back to the surface is love and understanding, and it's just simple. And it's so simple that sometimes it's hard to actually see that. And so I just so appreciate listening to all of you. And I know that we could continue this conversation like for so long, with stories of transformation, not just in ourselves, but in everyone that we come into contact with. And we point people to the truth of who they really are, and to understanding their own mind. And that's it. And it's just the simplest thing in the world. And so it can seem too complicated. But I love being in this space, because the feeling that I have now is so full of love. And you know, being in the rooms that we're in, where you see health, you don't see problems, you don't see bad behavior, you see the human behind their trauma, behind their bad feelings, behind their behavior, that's just a reflection of where their state of mind is, nothing more. So I just really appreciate having an opportunity to be in this space with you all, to kind of reflect on ourselves, the work that we're doing, and what all you do. Like, you know, Derek, the fact that now you can go back into prison, and Crystal, you're working with, you know, parents and kids, and Mavis, you're doing everything that you're doing always, you know, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to hang out with you all, and thank you for taking the time to, you know, to share yourselves and be you.
Thank you, Anna, for all that you do. Thank you, Inside Alliance. I really, really, yeah, I love it. I
And you.
love you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mavis. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Anna, for everything you do as well. Thank you, Monica, perfect host, and Mavis, you're a legend. Thank you.
That's what happens when you get old.
Yeah, right. So much more to it, Mavis. It's so
So modest.
appreciate you all, and I'd love, you know, maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Enjoyed it.